Hello, everybody. Welcome to this class, where I'm going to basically be teaching you about eliciting, elicitation, how to elicit. And this video is a long time coming because I did a little bit of research for this. I watched a movie, I listened to a podcast, and personally, let me tell you where my journey kind of takes off with elicitation. I desperately want to integrate this skill or this ability into myself, into my personality. I still think I have a long way to go. So that's why I'm kind of making this video to kind of teach myself at the same time about elicitation. So my background is English language teaching, and we learn about elicitation in university basically as a skill to get students to speak, right? Since you're teaching English, you need to get them to open up and use the language, right? So elicitation is this technique where you basically it's kind of like a double intention technique where you're really trying to get somewhere, right? But you appear to be doing something else, right? Like you'll ask, I don't know, someone like, what did you do this past weekend, right? And your intention is not so much to know what they did past the past weekend or the last weekend, as it is to get them to see that they can use past simple or the past simple tense, or that or you want to know if they can use the correct verbs, right? Instead of saying I go to the movie theater, they need to be able to say I went, right? So right away, if you say, oh, I go to the movie theater, you'll detect that in them, right? Well, anyway, first, let me talk about the movie. This is why I'm doing this video today, because I got done watching the movie, which actually it cost some money. It's on YouTube. It's called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's from 1988, and it's with Steve Martin and Michael Caine. This movie, personally, I'm not gonna do an analysis of the movie. It's kind of slow, but it does have those elements where I heard about these elements in the podcast. And I'm going to talk about that podcast too, but I can give you the information right now. It's called the Social Engineer Podcast with John Nolan, and it's on elicitation. So in that podcast, they talk about this movie, and they say that whole movie is all elicitation. Like the whole time they're eliciting information. So it's, again, avoiding direct questions, right? And trying to extract more nuanced information, or using more nuanced methods to extract the same type of information, but in more elaborate ways, right? In more indirect ways. Obviously, the movie is about two scammers, right? A British scammer and an American scammer. And long story short, it's basically they have a competition to see who can scam the best, right? Or who can scam first. But before that, in this case, we have Steve Martin. Steve Martin is Freddy, and he's kind of like a low budget, low quality, or low fidelity scammer, right? He does scams, but his scams are more like getting a free meal on the train, right? And whereas Michael Caine's character, Lawrence, he's a more sophisticated scammer. He's actually rich, and he doesn't just scam free lunches. He scams, like millions of dollars, like in jewelry and from women. So their target, this is a movie from 1988, but their target is basically like rich women, rich single women, like women that have lost their husbands, and all of a sudden they're stuck with like a fortune and a lot of money. So that's where these guys come in and operate, right? And that's what the movie is about. There's a twist, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, where the girl they're trying to scam, her name is Janet Colgate, I think. She ends up being a scammer too, and she scams them, right? So that's kind of like the twist, and at the end they all kind of become friends, which I thought was a great ending, but they didn't make a part two. So I was like, oh, that would have been perfect for like a sequel, right? To see where that would take us. Excuse me. Okay, so originally, I'm going to get into parts of the movie, specific parts for this video for elicitation. And I'm going to get into some things that I got from ChatGPT, as in like various methods of elicitation, And a little fun activity that I think you could try and we all could try just to kind of see how good we are at elicitation. Um, but let me begin very generally with what this is, right? And the background I get again for me is from learning, teaching, or the teaching learning process, which is my academic background, right? So originally, elicitation is for students, right? It's for a teacher to do with his or her students, and this is to provoke an answer or a response from someone, from the student, for example, based on the other person's actions or questions, right? So it's basically like a second intention. Let me give you some examples. Like for a student, you could ask them, is this past, present, or future? Right? And that could have many different intentions, like to get them to think about the different tenses, or to get them to remember the information. Maybe you could do it at the beginning of a lesson to get them to recall the information, right? Another example is to give the opposite word of something. So this could be done in conversation too. This is a technique, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, called playing dumb. So you say, for example, oh, that person, he's not sad. He's and you kind of do this where like it's on the tip of my tongue, like, and then the person will automatically say happy, right? Or angry, right? And they will like correct you. People are, ever since like grammar Nazis, they tend to want to correct other people, right? They're very critical. It's like, you got that wrong. And that's gold for people that are trying to elicit, right? Because you play dumb, you play like you don't really know what this is about, and people will give you that information, right? So that's another technique. Or you can say, like with students, my weekend was great because blah 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 blah. And there's this foul paw where people will try to one up you, right? Like if you say, oh, I went on vacation to the Bahamas, and someone hears that you're that's having a conversation with you, and they'll say, well, last year I went to Europe, right? Or something. Like they'll try to one up you, but again, that's getting information without asking. Because see, the problem with direct asking is that it creates a direct question generates hostility, generates suspicion, right? Like, why do you want to know? So elicitation works where you can't ask a direct question, but it's like finding other ways to get the same information, but through different means, right? Through more obscure, nuanced means, like I mentioned. So yeah, or you could just simply, my weekend was great because blah blah blah. So you put yourself on the table out there, and this could even be false information. It doesn't have to be genuine, but then the other person, may want to share, or if they don't, you're more able to now say, what did you do? You share now with me, like I shared with you, now you share with me, right? Quid pro quo, which is another technique we're going to get into. So in short words, or in summary, what you do is you contextualize the people, right? You give them a context, right? Kind of like a teacher does, right? Like a lead-in activity, you contextualize it, and they should offer up that information, right? It's kind of based on planning, but also, I guess, luck and experience, right? How well are you at extracting information from other people without them realizing you're extracting information from them, right? This is like total agent spy methods as well. Okay, so in the Social Engineer podcast with John Nolan, they were specifically talking about ways to get information without asking questions, right? Which I think is a great activity that you can try to do or practice with family and friends without them knowing, right? And then maybe afterwards explain to them what you were trying to do. You can also try negotiating without using questions, right? So the only thing you're able to do is elicit, and I'm going to get into the eliciting techniques in a moment. And this is to try to get someone to do something, right? So here are some examples. You need help with a presentation. You need to ask for help, but you can't ask. You can't use a question, right? So what are some ways that you can do? You can elicit the information, right? You can elicit the help. You can say things like, oh, hey, I see you're pretty good. For example, I see you're pretty good with presentations. I have a big presentation coming up. It's very complicated for me. I'm stressing out about it, right? Just say that. And maybe the person will offer up the help, right? And you didn't ask. You see the trick there? The trick is not to ask, but present yourself or present information in a way that will get the other person to either offer up help or whatever, or information, right? Asking for a shift change. So you're at work, you want to get your shift change, right? But again, you can't ask a question. Seeking a mentor, or asking for resources, right? Like this is very typical, I think, with people that will say, "Oh man, like I'm so broke, like, and I have to pay all these things this month, you know." And then the person will just offer up money, right? Like they'll say, like, "Hey, do you want to borrow some money? I got money I can let you borrow." So that's an elicitation method, right? Of not directly coming out and saying, "Hey, can I borrow some money?" Right? But like presenting yourself in these other ways to get to the same objective or the same goal, right? So yeah, try it with friends, family for practice. So this is the activity. You are going to try to get them to do something or offer up some help or information without you asking questions. So you need to get to that goal without asking any questions, right? That's kind of like the activity. Now, that's not to say that in elicitation you can't ask questions, because you can, right? But again, they have to be questions that aren't the question, right? They could be like questions that will lead to that, right? But I'll get into that in a little bit. So I asked ChatGPT to give me some different methods of elicitation, and here we go. One of them, these three are kind of related: flattery, complimenting, and appeal to ego. So this is basically like the, kind of like the plain dumb, but backwards. So now it's you. You're so cool. You're like a god. You're awesome at this. You are very knowledgeable in this. Like, wow. And they say everybody loves to talk about themselves, right? Or something like that. Like there's no other topic of conversation more awesome than talking about yourself, right? So if like someone compliments you, "Oh, hey, like you always dress so nicely," right? And you want to know where they get their clothes from, instead of asking, "Where do you get your clothes from?" They may be like, "Why?" You may say, "Oh, like I love your style. I love the way your clothes look." And they may just offer up that information. "Oh, really? Well, I got these at Walmart," or wherever they got it from. So it's basically the and I don't method for elicitation. There are other darker ones like guilt tripping, right? So making the person feel bad. Sympathy plea, which this is basically like this is like getting on your, this is very direct, I would say, but getting on your hands and knees, right? Just basically like, "Please, please, like do that for me." And friendliness. But these three, guilt tripping, sympathy plea, and friendliness, just being friendly, but obviously like a fake friendly, rely on emotional people. So these work on emotional people. The appeal to ego, complimenting, and flattery may work more on people that are like selfish, right? Excuse me. Okay. The next ones are innocent inquiry and playing dumb, right? Which is basically like innocent inquiry. Inquiry is like asking questions. So it's like like you're innocent. You're like you're watching someone do something and you want to know how, or how it's done, but you want to get to other type of information. So you can say like, "Hey, how are you doing that?" Like, and again, it kind of relates. Like you're innocent, you're dumb, you don't really know, right? You're playing this role. For example, asking someone how something works when you need to know yourself, right? Or when you know that information, but you want to double check if they know, right? Like sometimes I think bosses or people will do this on me, where they'll be like, or even students, where they'll play dumb, but I'm not really sure. I can't confirm that, but they'll say like, "How do you, can you help me out with this report?" Like, and they'll say something like that just to see if right? They want to test you, for example. You can do the same with people, right? Like, "How do you do this?" Right? Play dumb or innocent. offering help. I think this is more of a transactional one, like quid pro quo, sorry. I give you this, you give me that, right? I give you this, or what do you need, right? I'll give you this, or I give you a gift. I come into the office with a cup of coffee. Hey, like, here's a cup of coffee for you. And then I need a favor, right? I need to know when the next whatever is happening or whatever. And because they know. Urgency. Urgency is a technique that social hackers, it seems kind of cool, social hacking, but actually they're bad people. They're bad people on the internet scamming you, right? Click on this link, whatever, and then they take your information. So I'm going to get into this in a moment with a TED Talk that I also watched on social hacking. So be careful with people that are under an emergency situation. Like, this happens when you're selling things online, and they'll go like, I need this, like, now, like I really need it, like, and it's like, whoa, like, take a step back. If a person is telling you that they urgently need something that you're selling, nah, it's probably a scam, because those type of people don't want to give you time to think and reflect and kind of analyze the situation, right? They'll cover you with this emotional situation where it's like, it's urgent, right? Urgency. But you can use this too. Like, it's urgent. Like, I need this information now. Like, boss is waiting, like, whatever, right? So that's another technique for elicitation, but kind of darker. False consensus. So this one, along with reciprocity and scarcity, they're kind of like, well, false consensus has to deal with social proof, or deals with social proof, which is like the Robert Cialdini's influence book, where he talks about how to influence people. And social proof or false consensus is basically like, everyone has agreed to this, right? Like, you're just the one that's like stuck in that step. Like, come on, let's move it along, right? So again, elicitation, where you say like, everybody knows how to do this but me, right? Oh, okay, I'll teach you, I'll show you. Pretending to share interests and exploiting curiosity. So for pretending to share interest, this is basically like when you say, oh, someone likes soccer. So then you talk to them about soccer, right? Even though you don't like soccer, you do a little bit of background digging, and then you're like, oh, I'm really into soccer myself, right? That's kind of like to establish a fake rapport with someone. And exploiting curiosity, right? Where you will basically, like, I'm going to get into this also with the movie when I talk about the movie, but it could be like cutting a conversation where it's not over, right? Or giving someone a piece of incomplete information to kind of poke their curiosity, so then they're able to ask you, like, tell me more about that, or, kind of like get them wrapped up around those notions or that situation. Again, I'm trying to understand all of this so I can also use it, because they are like kind of manipulation tactics. And we would go back to Operation Magician, my playlist, on those 8 videos, I think. But yeah, so we talked about reciprocity, scarcity from Cialdini. I've talked about those plenty of times. So reciprocity is like, again, the quid pro quo, and consistency, like having people appear to be consistent so they don't look crazy or sick, right? And the scarcity, right? Like, again, that urgency, like limited time offer only, these will only be here for the next 2 days, one more day, sign up in the next like 3 hours, because you'll lose the opportunity to get this excellent deal or whatever. Hypotheticals, which I thought was an interesting one, like going up to someone and, what would you say if I told you right? Like speaking in hypotheticals, right? I think that one's also kind of interesting. And common problems. So common problems is like, again, I always have this problem with my machine, with my computer, right? I always have this problem with I don't know, like, you want to know how someone handles their money. I'm going to have a video coming up on the psychology of money. I'm doing a little research on that. So you want to know how someone budgets money, their money. So you could say, I always have problems with my money, budgeting my money. And they'll probably like give you information, offer up information, right? Like, oh, well, I have a tip that may help you, blah, 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 without asking them, like, how do you budget your money, right? Because again, that's direct, that creates suspicion, right? Hostility. What do you want to know? Okay, so I'm gonna get into the movie with specific scenes. There's a specific scene in the beginning. We first see Lawrence, Michael Caine's character, doing a scam. But his scam, like I said, is more sophisticated. It deals with rich women. And Freddy's scam is very, I would say, like, it's more, I don't know if it's practical, but it's more, it's simple, right? Because what he does is, and he has this recurrent theme throughout the movie where he talks about a fake grandma that's in need of an operation or something like that. He sits down at this table with this. They're on a train, and Lawrence's character is there, and he's observing Freddy and the interaction with this woman the whole time. So he arrives at the table and he asks the woman, "May I sit down?" She says yes. So he sits down. Um, and then the waiter comes up, but before the waiter comes up, he says, "Oh, I'm hungry. I'm starving." And this is that type of thing that you can say. The woman apparently pays no mind, right? Like she's reading a newspaper or whatever, but she hears, right? She does hear that. So he'll say that like just out loud, like, "Oh, I'm starving. I'm so hungry." But then he like looks at the prices of the menu, and he's like, "Oh wow, like this is too expensive. Like I'll just have some water." Right? And then like anybody's gonna be like, "Whoa, like you're starving, but you're just gonna have water." So it's basically like, I have no money. Then he talks about the whole emotional thing with like, I'm saving up money because I need to help my grandmother. She's gonna have surgery, blah blah blah. And he just gets into like this whole appeal to emotion thing, where eventually the woman just cracks and she's like, "Hey, waiter, come back. Like, give this man whatever he wants. Like, it's on me." Like, and he gets a free meal, right? Again, he's just eliciting. He's not asking, can you buy me a meal? He's doing all these things, and he eventually gets the woman to buy a meal for him, right? So I thought that scene was great. Again, the whole time Lawrence is observing, and Lawrence is obviously a better scammer than Freddy. Freddy's doing like these low time scam things, like getting a free meal. So they first have their first contact in a train wagon or in a train room, and Freddy actually goes into the wagon, and Lawrence is already there. So what Lawrence does in this case is he kind of plays dumb, right? Like Freddy's like, "Oh man, like women, they have so much money and blah blah blah." And then Lawrence does the elicitation technique where he plays dumb, right? He's like, "Really? Like, I wouldn't know much about that. I have a wife and kids." And he doesn't, right? He's just playing Freddy. And Freddy's like, "Really? Like, let me tell you." And again, that's that appeal to ego, like, "Oh, you sure know more than me about this." And it's hilarious because he obviously doesn't. Lawrence is the one who's playing him, but he thinks he's teaching Lawrence about how to play women and how to scam, right? So I thought that was awesome. He sets it up so there's a girl that comes on the train because Lawrence doesn't want Freddy to end up going to the city where he's going, because then there would be two scammers in that city. So he sets it up so a girl comes on the train, kind of seduces him, but again in very indirect ways, and he ends up taking off. But eventually he returns to the city, and that's when the competition between both of them kind of starts. So again, for this scene where the woman comes on the train, what happens is that this is another elicitation technique where you're talking to a person, and your target, the third person, is within ear range, right? So you're sharing whatever problem you have, and then you hope that third person will kind of help you out, right? Like you'll talk about a problem you have, and that third person should be able to feel bad enough for you that they'll offer help for you, right? And yeah, that way Lawrence gets rid of Freddy. Lawrence was even like, I didn't know about that. That wasn't really a scam, but that was like like a setup. I didn't really know about it after Lawrence got off the train and talked to like his man or his bodyguard, and he's like, "Yeah, thank you for setting up the girl or whatever." Because Lawrence is actually at one point like, "Hey, no, like don't leave. Like we got some exploring to do in the city," and Freddy's like, which is the notion of reverse psychology, right? Like you really want them to go, but you'll say stay. Excuse me. Okay, so then we get into like a couple of different scams they do, like with Fanny. And at this point of the movie, I had the idea of like, you can't really do long-term scams with people because they'll find out eventually. So basically, you have to work someone and then leave or retract, right? Which is kind of like the like a hack, like a social hacker. A step, like the last step in social hacking is erase all traces that you've been there, right? So again, you can ask a question, right? That's okay as long as it's not the actual question, right? You can ask questions that will move you along towards getting the information you need, or the target, the objective, right? So you can use these questions as like an impulsor and a motivator, but for something else. Not, you can't ask the question, right? The direct question. Freddie eventually finds out that Lawrence is like a big time scammer. He has a nice house. And Freddie says, I want this, right? I want the life you have. Teach me. Please teach me. And Lawrence is like, okay, I guess I'll teach you. And this is where I learned this, which I kind of knew this. I think we all kind of know this already. Appearances matter. And let me tell you something. Here, I think you have to do two things which are actually paradoxical at the same time based on physical appearance. You need to stand in and you need to stand out at the same time. So what do I mean by stand in and stand out? Stand in means that you have to appear normal. You have to appear common, but not so common that you'll get lost in commonality, right? In the mass, right? You'll be invisible. You have to stand out to a certain extent in subtle ways, right? So the first thing that Lawrence teaches Freddy is how to dress, right? Because Lawrence, again, his method of elicitation is more sophisticated. He dresses his part, right? Like a wealthy rich man. And Freddy is he kind of looks like a tourist. I don't know, like a tourist that has overstayed in some area. So he dresses like the first thing, appearances, right? And if you've ever seen any montage of like, okay, like in that movie with I think it was Ryan Gosling and the guy from The Office, which I love, but I don't remember right now. I think it's called, let me see, because I have it here. Oh yeah, Stupid and Crazy Love or something like that with Emma Stone. The first thing that is done in that movie in order to change like who you are is, again, the clothes, right? So change your appearance immediately. Got to stand in and out at the same time. Yeah, that's food for thought. Okay, so and then I also had this idea where like you need experience for this, because how many times have you planned something, especially in social contexts, and how many times have they actually gone according to plan? Right? Like you'll plan something, you'll want things to move along this path, but so many unexpected situations come up that eventually you get taken off the road, and then you just like, so I think you need to be able to plan and adapt, but also have the experience to be able to operate on that spontaneous level of doing things, right? If that kind of makes sense. But yeah, just I think the feeling of being able to do something that you planned that actually works the way you planned it, I think that's a great like just coherent sensation that anybody would have, right? Which is for me again hard to achieve, right? Like I'll plan something in my head, and then when I actually carry it out, it's like people are unexpected. They'll say unexpected things, right? Like you'll think they'll go this way, but they actually turn that way, or so the key thing that I want you to take from this video, which I've recently taken, is also that you need to talk and feed people information, even if they appear not to be paying attention. So this is like the scene from Freddy in the movie where he's saying all these things like, "Oh, I'm starving, I'm so hungry, I'll just have some water," you know. And like the girl, I swear, the girl, she's paying no attention, right? She's reading a newspaper, whatever, or you could even say nowadays when people are on their phones, right? But they're still listening. They do hear, right? I used to think they don't care, they're not listening, but they are listening. That's like information, like background noise to them, but it's background noise that ultimately registers. And not only, it may not register fully maybe in their conscious, but it does in their unconscious. That information is going in, and then you can use that information later on to leverage things, right? Again, a lot with the overhearing, over talking, right? Like people will overhear you, right? And you're feeding them that information. So I'm going to get into this notion a little bit between distinction between men and women. So what happens a lot in this movie, and again, this is from 1988, is that they're exploiting trust, right? Both of them exploit women, right? And I think for women, a lot of it has to do with trust, right? And I'm going to get into the quality that you can exploit in men. In women, you exploit trust, right? In men, you exploit greed, right? Because they're going to want to make money or whatever, right? Like if it has to do with money, men are exploitable. If it has to do with helping or, trusting someone, then women are exploitable, right? So that's kind of like the difference. That's kind of like a theory I have. Okay, and let me get into the TED Talk. The TED Talk is called Social Engineering, The Art of Hacking Humans by Prasad Sawant. I'm not going to get into the examples he gives because this video would be very long, but go watch that video. He gives some great examples, especially if you're buying things online. But he does talk about the emotional side of social hacking, right? Of scamming, which is exploiting fear, exploiting curiosity, trust, and greed, right? Which I thought was excellent. And he does give us this lesson, which I've already shared, which is the urgency factor. If at any moment anybody's pressuring you to do something, take a step back because they're probably scamming you, right? Like, oh, like this is urgent, like I need this right now, or I need nah, like just hold on. What do you mean? Like you're not gonna pressure me, because that's where people make mistakes and eventually get scammed, right? Okay, and then for this, I kind of had this idea where like I thought for women, again with the difference between men and women, for women, they need to think they have an impact on men's emotions. So that's where the typical Casanova will be like, oh, like for you, I would die, and all these type of things, where it's all emotional. It's like you, the woman, have had such an impact on me, right? And then the other way, right, around would be that for men, they need to think that they have had an impact on women's thoughts or ideas, right? So again, men are logical, women are emotional. That's the premise of this, right? I know it's a controversial premise nowadays, but I'm just saying, like, for sake of argument. And in this case, it's like if men can perceive that they're influencing a woman logically or with ideas, that's probably the way to seduce a man, right? So just let me know what you think about that in the comments. Am I right, or am I just crazy with that idea? Okay, let me just get into a couple more points from the movie. So another technique is finishing up a conversation when it's not over yet, right? So this will create the emotion or spark the emotion of curiosity, right? Like, hold on, what was that? Like, you're leaving already? Like, hold on, come back here, right? And the movie is actually kind of witty because what they end up doing is like they basically have a fight, Freddie and Lawrence, about who's the one that's gonna be in the city, and they have a competition. They see this woman come in, Janet Colgate, and I guess they call her like the soap queen or something like that. So they think she's wealthy. She comes from money, and like she enters the hotel, she drops all her things from her bag. Everybody's helping her, and they set the bet. They said whoever gets her to give them $50,000, the other person will have to leave the city, right? So they make that bet, they shake on it. Um, and what ends up happening is kind of funny. I'm not gonna get too much into the movie. Go watch it. This part is kind of funny, but ultimately, Freddy seduces the woman by pretending he's in a wheelchair and he needs to see the psychiatrist. And in order to see him, he's charging $50,000, right, to see him. So then Lawrence, he kind of sees this and he's like, whoa, like I'm falling behind. I need to make up for what I've already lost in time. So he ends up acting like the psychiatrist, right? And it's so funny because then, Freddy's like, what? And the whole time they're just trying to one up each other in the competition, because it is a competition. So he ends up becoming his psychiatrist, and he ends up hitting his legs, which is funny. But at the same time, I think this is very hard to do in real life, because usually in this movie, you see that all of these people that are getting scammed, they're alone, right? And when you're alone, you're more vulnerable, right? Just like Janet Colgate. Nowadays, and especially with social media, people aren't that alone, right? People have people around them, like looking after them, taking care of them, and telling them like what's what, who's who, what's what, especially with social media. So I think on a practical level, nowadays, this would be very hard to carry out, right? And another thing was bringing up incomplete information, like Janet Colgate. I had my suspicions that Janet Colgate was a scam artist, but I confirmed it in the scene where she's talking about how she's trying to raise the money to Lawrence. So then Lawrence says, what do you mean trying to raise the money? So she's doing an elicitation technique where she's bringing up incomplete information, right? Because again, she promised to pay Lawrence the $50,000 because he's the psychiatrist that's seeing Freddy for his legs. And she brings up the incomplete information, right? Like, I need to raise money. And Lawrence is like, what do you mean you need to raise money? And she's like, yeah, I had this competition and I won it, and he's like, what do you mean? I thought you were the queen of soap. And she's like, yeah, I am the queen of soap of the competition that we had in my town or something like that. And he's like, oh, I thought you were like from money. Like, I thought your family had like a soap business or something like that. And she's like, no, like I just won a competition and I'm trying to get the money. But the whole time, you see, she's giving incomplete information, and she's getting Lawrence to do the work, to do the asking, right? Again, elicitation, curiosity, right? You're sparking that curiosity. And that's when I was like, yeah, no, she's scamming them, right? She ends up playing them. She ends up taking Freddy's cents, right? I'm gonna call them cents because it wasn't a lot of money. And she ends up taking Lawrence's 50,000. She scams them to the point where instead of her giving them money, they give her the $50,000, right? And she ends up leaving on a plane, and she plays them both, right? Now, what I want to know about this movie, in case you watch it or have watched it, is how far back did she intend to scam these people? And how far back did she intend to scam Freddy and Lawrence? Because for me, it's like the first time you get a glimpse of Janet Colgate is in the hotel where she drops all her things. So did she know from that point that these guys were in the hotel observing her? And because the whole movie she plays like this dumb character, like she's like, oh, like she just plays stupid the whole time. But again, she's playing stupid. That's a technique. So these guys think that they're what do they say, knights in white armor coming to rescue her, right? Where in reality she's playing them the whole time. And I thought that was a great twist at the end. But yeah, that's just something that I would like to know, like how far back. I guess I would have to watch it again. How far back did she plan all of this? And let me just give you the last conclusive thought I have on this topic. Janet, at the end of the movie, comes back. She comes back with rich people on a yacht or a boat, and these people have money, right? And she comes back, and I think Lawrence did this to Freddie at one point in the movie too. But these guys hate her because she just scammed them. Remember, they hate her. But she comes back dressed differently, but you can tell it's her. And she changed her name, whatever. And she's like, yeah, guys, this is the villa I was telling you about. And this is my business partner, says a made up name. And that's kind of like the ball's in your court. You're either going to continue to play the game. I did scam you. I outwitted you. I won. I beat you too at the same time. But I'm bringing you new clients. I'm bringing you new people to scam. Are you going to get all emotional with me and, basically say, what the hell are you thinking? And ruin the potential to have more money from these guys that we can scam? Or are you going to play the part? Are you going to play the game? Are we going to continue this? Right? Which I thought was great. So it's like this moment of suspense, like what's Lawrence going to say? Because she introduces him as this Australian guy. And he's like, and all of a sudden he's like, and he talks like in an Australian accent. And he's like, oh, welcome to the island. And I was like, yeah. So they end up becoming friends at the end, like all three of them, I guess, and they're gonna work together now to scam people. I don't know, which I thought again would be a part two would have been great to see how they operated, like as a team of scammers. Yeah, but I thought it was a great ending. It was an alright movie. So the last thought I wanted to say is that when you do this, when you're sneaky like this, ultimately what you're doing really is you're being friendly. In a weird way, you're being friendly with people. You're being nice, right? And this can get you friends, right? Now, you would have to think about what type of people you would really want in your life, or basically the type of people that you would want to have around you, because all these type of things like establishing rapport, sharing common interest, asking people to mentor you, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Can you explain to me? Appealing to ego, complimenting, flattery is going to get people to kind of, you're going to kind of be stuck with people. And that's kind of like the downside, especially if you're not that social or you're not a people's person. Like, I think people that are people or people's person, they have an easy time doing this because they just naturally like people. But if you're kind of like me and you kind of like to be left alone, it's going to be harder for you to do this, because the consequence of all this is that you ultimately get friends, right? And that's, it may sound sad to say, but it's kind of like the takeaway from all of this, right? Where you're going to be basically like meeting new people, making friends, establishing relationships and things like that. So just know, and I talk about this in Operation Magician, just know that it has its consequences. I mean, like the negative consequences would be that you get found out and then just people think you're a scammer and you're up to no good, so they just don't trust you ever again. But the positive consequence would be that people actually like you, and now they want you around and they want to be around you, and they want you to be around them, etc. So just consider that. So let me know what you think about this video. This was everything I had about how to elicit. I'm still practicing it. Let me know if you do that exercise, how it goes. Don't ask questions and try to get that information or that negotiation with the person. And yeah, that's all I got for this video. So I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.